partners in delivering this series. So we've got Royal Life Saving Society Australia, we have Commercial Aquatics Australia, OTM Sport and Leisure Planning Group, we've got YMCA Victoria, the Victorian State Government Health and Human Services Department, we have Belgravia Leisure, Cleaning Melbourne, the VACA Group, Align Leisure, Watch Around Water as a national program, EcoSave, and Western Leisure Services as well. So thank you to all of our partners on the initiative. So today's session, as we mentioned, we've got our two presenters, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to work through asking them some questions. The upcoming webinars that we have next Thursday in this stream, we have Mark Collins, who's the CEO of Belgravia Kids, talking about leading through uncertainty and change, looking through the lens of the Jump acquisition, which was a big one for his organization. We have the following Thursday we have Justin Scarr, the CEO of Royal Life Saving Society Australia, talking about industry recovery strategies. The following Thursday we have Bruce Mackay, talking about starting over after a crisis, lessons from Greenfields. If you're not familiar with Bruce, he set up the model for both Peninsula Aquatic and Recreation Centre and Western Leisure Services. And then the following Thursday, we have Jeremy Grigg from EcoSave, talking about opportunities to significantly reduce your expenses in energy consumption. So without further ado, I'll move into the interview component of the webinar. Thanks again to Caroline and Nick. So we'll just take turns sort of muting and unmuting ourselves. I'm going to turn my camera off and we'll go from there. Thanks, everyone. So Nick, welcome. I might just start with yourself, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I just wanted to ask, as it became clear that this COVID-19 was becoming not just a health crisis, but a business crisis, what were the first steps that you took to sort of transition and prepare your organization to respond?
Well, I think in terms of preparing for an event like this, I don't think anyone would have a business continuity plan that would include such a large catastrophic event of this magnitude. So I think anyone that suggests they've pulled out their BCP and referred to, step one, step two, step three is probably kidding themselves. So I think to be blunt, to be honest, we were very much scrambling. Early days, we were trying to anticipate what was happening, but of course things were happening so fast it was really difficult to prepare and transition into what was now the situation we're in, which is largely hibernation. I think it's probably fair to say, even at probably an industry level, we were in some ways the, if you like, the canary in the coal mine, where we were first to understand what impact it was having on the business well before all the forced closures. So for us as a business, and we have obviously a large portfolio of not only leisure stuff, but tourism related stuff, golf courses, day spas, but we were detecting a pretty significant drop off in revenue, even late February, of course, early March. And so that was the first signs that things weren't going well. Of course, on the back of a disastrous summer with bushfires and floods and dust storms and everything else, it was a pretty tumultuous and challenging period. But we were very much anticipating or detecting initially significant drop-offs in casual taking. So, 30-40% drop-off year on year, unprecedented levels of cancellations and suspensions that were starting to happen well before the closures. And so at that point, we had to make some pretty drastic and strong decisions in preparing for what was the inevitable stage of the closure. But initially it was acting fast, acting decisively, being somewhat brutal in terms of having to make some tough calls around, the obvious stripping out casual hours, no discretionary spends, looking at some positive marketing opportunities before the closures, because it was all unfolding in front of our eyes, and it was largely trying to hold back the tide, which was a really difficult and challenging period. So that first week and a half, even 2 weeks before the forced closures, was really challenging. Once it became evident that the entire industry, and in fact the entire world, was all in the same situation, it in some ways it became a little bit easier for them to transition to, as I said, this stage of hibernation. We're in the same situation as most of the operators in this space, where we have practically zero revenue. And of course, when you're in that stage, there's only one of few things you can really do. And of course, the first priority had to be, first and foremost, quite selfishly looking after the company, because without the company, there are no jobs. So we had to be careful and as I mentioned before, acting quickly and decisively around protecting the cash flows and making sure that we were going to exist into the coming months, if not years, to be around to make sure we can employ people and you know, I suppose grow and rebuild out of the closure period. So firstly, we had to look after the company requirements, and that largely, you know, came a cash flow challenge because of the demands that were being placed on payments to staff, payments to creditors, payments to a lot of our contract partners where we had rent agreements in place. And of course, the second priority, which is really important one, is around the well-being of our people. Keeping in mind, it was probably at least 2 weeks before things like JobSeeker and then, of course, JobKeeper kicked in. So it was pretty stressful and pretty full on. A lot of hours worked by a lot of people, not just myself, but, you know, an incredible team that were doing enormous amount of work behind the scenes to try and hold things together. And I think it was probably about week 2 or 3, possibly, that we started to become a little bit more organised, quite intentional about making sure we were communicating with our people. You know, we had things like, you know, our CEO lives every few days, constant and regular communication with our contract partners, and starting to plan and develop a model of what this hibernation period really looks like for us.
Thanks, Nick. That's a really insightful and detailed response, and it sounds like, you know, especially when you're sitting at the top of the heap and you're carrying all of these people and you know, expectations, it can be really scary, and it's really great to hear that that sort of honesty there, and also, yeah, you know, we look at crisis management quite a bit, and how you sort of close that window of uncertainty, and it sounds like you guys put in a really good process there. Caroline, I might just move over to you. So sort of moving past that very first initial response, now that we seem to be in a bit more of a, let's call it a stable phase of restrictions, you know, Dan Andrews announced that the current stage 3 restrictions will go for at least another 4 weeks. What does the average week look like for you and your senior management team?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Look, I think I would reiterate everything that Nick has just said. It sounds almost like a mirror image of what we have had to face. And look, I agree that we're settling into a stable phase in terms of physical isolation and distancing restrictions. It's fantastic to see that the spread of the COVID-19 is definitely flattening, obviously with the doubling days now over 50, which is, if you reflect on it, it's just amazing news. And to know that everything that we are doing is actually working and our actions are saving lives. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. I wouldn't say that just yet we're in a stable economic conditions though. The federal government and state government are doing an absolutely amazing and terrific job with relief packages in the area of childcare and JobKeeper. And these are certainly welcome relief, but they're complex to understand and administer, and still day by day requiring significant senior management leadership and adaptability. And as a result, we're still working around the clock, to be honest. The Y is an incredibly resilient not-for-profit organisation. It's been around for 168 years. And during that time, we've overcome wars, recessions, Great Depressions, floods, fires. And generally during these times, we're actually the ones there for communities giving help. For example, in the 2009 Black Saturday bushfires, it was the Y that was there for so many communities to help them recover. I think the impact of this pandemic, as Nick said, is not something that any of us planned for, and certainly I think that we didn't have a BCP plan for it, nor here, nor worldwide, in terms of the Y worldwide. And just for you to understand, there's 2,400 Ys across the world, and they've had to do what Nick described, really focus on ourselves. And unfortunately, that has had an impact on hundreds of thousands of people around the world who have been furloughed or stood down. And this is not something that any of us have taken these decisions lightly to do. For Why Victoria, we're no different. 90% of our 174 sites are dependent on face-to-face services, and they're now all closed. So the only area that we have open are two, which is our children's programs and our youth justice work. So over the first 4 weeks, just like Nick, we have, myself and my senior management team have been working out how we can survive this pandemic economically, looking at our cash flows, looking at ensuring that we have a sustainable business to come back to when we reopen. Our number one priority, as always, has been throughout this, is supporting our staff. And such, we have really done a lot of work around making sure that all avenues of communicating with our staff, which no doubt I'll talk about later, are accommodated. Also, I decided very early on, if I'm going to be asking staff to stand down, that I am going to work without pay also. So I must admit, I'm really looking forward to JobKeeper payments at this stage after 4 weeks of having no pay. It is really significant. And I think you've got to walk, true leadership is walking in the shoes of your staff and ensuring that you can feel their pain as you're feeling pain yourself. So that's what I have chosen to do. Our staff, our senior management also, because we've got some businesses open, we've been working, obviously with the changes in the children's programs, and we've had to pivot our youth justice programs. So just to give you an appreciation of what we do in children's programs, we run 18 early learning centres and 36 OSH and vacation care. And basically we've gone from having to wind them down with 70% of that business decreasing to now winding it back up with the help that we're getting from government and re-employing back people that we've stood down so that we can help. And we're very, very proud to be able to help families who help in essential services such as healthcare, and really to help the vulnerable children. And that's our true north at the Y, is we believe in the power of inspired young people. So being able to get back to what we love doing, which is helping vulnerable children and young people, has been really important for us. We also have had to pivot, as I said, our youth justice work. So we work in Ravenhall Prison, and we provide both recreation and job readiness programs within the prison. And we also provide job opportunities after those young people get out of prison. And we've been able to keep that open. It's a facility management service. This service reduces the recidivism or repeat offending rate from about 60% down to 3%. So as you can imagine, during this time, it's incredibly important work that we're actually ramping up. And indeed, the team have pivoted and repurposed into doing other essential work like COVID-19 cleaning for organisations. So our senior leaders are not only looking at our open business, but also working with our customers whose centres have closed. We're supporting them with converting all of our normal face-to-face programming with digital and on-demand and live content. And obviously, I'm incredibly proud of what our day-to-day management team have been able to achieve in the time of crisis. I know that I've got the best team, and I'm so pleased. I'm not surprised, but I'm so pleased to have a team that have been able to rise to that challenge and to lead an organisation and our people in a way that the Y always do in the times of crisis.
Yeah, wow. Thanks, Caroline. It sounds like there's a lot going on there, and it's interesting. Both, obviously there's different sort of impetuses or drivers for being in the recreation space, depending on the organization type. But we're all so reliant on that face-to-face interaction, and this crisis has just sort of wiped. You mentioned 90%, and maybe for Belgravia it's even higher, but it's just really wiped so much of what we do for the community, whether that be on a not-for-profit basis or for a profit basis. But the value and the social value that we provide is huge, and just to see that wiped out is obviously having a significant impact both for the people that work in the industry, but also the community more broadly. Nick, I'll just sort of move to you now. How do you ensure that Belgravia Leisure navigates complexity like this one and others successfully? Do you have a bit of a war cabinet? Have you got a sort of team of trusted advisors? How do you sort of go through the really complex stuff and wade through that with your team?
Yeah, well, it's as I mentioned before, this is unprecedented. Yeah, so we certainly didn't have a playbook, and we did huddle very quickly. Like Carolyn, I too have an amazing executive leadership team, and the strength of the national support leadership team is just incredible. The challenge was to try and gather and collect them in a timely fashion, in a coordinated fashion. We operate across obviously all states and across New Zealand as well. So it was a little bit challenging to try and get all the heads together and think through this. And I think it was moving so fast. It was really hard to keep everyone up to speed on what was happening and what changes were unfolding in front of our eyes. I think the other thing is, and it's probably a bit of a lesson in leadership, if you like it, and it's not I would like to think that it's not my default style, but at times of crisis, it does require a greater level of autonomy, autocracy than what it otherwise would. I think there's times for consultation and collaboration and of course communication, and we try and be as democratic or as laissez-faire as we like, but when things were moving so fast and things were so critical to try and take decisive action, I probably did feel the need to step into a little bit more of an autocratic style. And so therefore we were making decisions very quickly in the interests of the company to then protect the interests and well-being of our people. But we certainly had some good people around. I think, as I said, because of the pace of change and the information that was flowing so quickly from our sites to our contract partners, to government, particularly federal government and some of the proposed legislative changes that they were rolling out, it was pretty much trying to unravel that and interpret that as quick as we possibly could to then look at deploying it at a site level. We have some tremendous talent, as I know the Y does, and so we also had to accept, and I had to accept at some point, to back off and get the hell out of their way and let them do their job, because they are absolute experts and specialists in this space. An example would be, how to interpret and analyse the JobKeeper program and making sure that it's being interpreted properly for the thousands and thousands of staff that are entitled to it, but also keeping in mind that it's a business incentive as well. And so we need to make sure that that it's balancing the needs of the individual and balancing the needs of the company, because we're talking about a large amount of cash flow that we have to sustain as well during a period whereby reimbursement or the return of that advance payment is many months or many weeks away at this point. So yeah, it's a pretty complex, fast-moving world we live in, and as I said, we certainly didn't have it all by any means perfect, and we've learned a lot over the last couple of weeks. I think some of the things that we did early were very much around the obvious, around cost cutting. I think the focus now for us is probably shifting from cost cutting to more productivity improvement, and in my view, the two are very different. So we can talk about cost cutting, which had to happen, but also the notion of productivity improvement, about how do we get better and more efficient at doing the same things, and that's very much on our radar now as we start to get ready for the next stage, but also planning for that growth that needs to come at some point. But yeah, look, it's as I mentioned, a fast-paced, changing world we live in. There's no roadmap for it, but thankfully we have had an incredible team that have been just, as Carolyn said, so proud of their willingness and their desire to get in, whether they're getting paid or not. The vast majority of us, as Carolyn has indicated, have all gone either part-time or been stood down or have taken a hit personally, and I think that just indicates the level of passion and commitment that our people have. We're all pretty connected to the communities in which we work and serve, and very passionate about the industries in which we operate. So I'd suggest that's probably consistent right throughout the industry, whether that's a contract management company or a local government model. They're all very, very passionate about the leisure industry.
Yeah, I can see just even scrolling through the list of people that have signed in for the session. You know, from both your organisations, there's staff there in your leisure centres who, you know, some of whom are not being paid at the moment, but they're here, they've signed in, they're listening. They're wanting to, you know, hear from you guys and stay engaged and stay motivated. And that, you know, that's a testament to both of your organizations and also the people that work for them and the people that you hire and that you retain. It's really good to see, and you know, it's great to see a lot of familiar names there from my perspective as well. So welcome everyone. So Caroline, how are you supporting and engaging with your staff and stakeholders at this point in time?
Yeah, thank you. It's been absolutely the most important thing that we are doing. And I think providing regular and transparent updates to staff as the fast pace of information comes to light has been incredibly important. What we've been doing is we've created a COVID-19 portal. We've used SMSs, email updates, doing live webinars, you know, at least weekly, if not more often as information comes to light. Generally, when I do a live webinar with our people, with our teams, I generally get over 1,000 people listening in. And I think this is because we've been trying to be just incredibly transparent, trying to help people understand that we're working as hard and as quickly as we possibly can. And that's why people are really keen to attend the webinars. I think particularly the Q&A time that we've been doing is raw. It's like face-to-face communication. So our teams have really appreciated our authenticity, our transparency. Our reflection on it is that I think so many people are saturated with so much information from so many different media sources. So they're finding it really quite confusing. So they've really appreciated hearing our clear messaging and being able to ask questions about their own individual circumstance. And sometimes we don't know the answer. And I think just being raw and saying, you know what, I'm just so sorry, we just don't know yet about that particular circumstance has really helped lead our people really well in a time when people are feeling very vulnerable and anxious. And so we've tried to do that so that people feel less anxious. That's our staff. We're also doing the same thing with our customers. So we've been doing live webinars with our customers. So for example, when the childcare relief package came out, we had a live webinar and had, you know, more than 100 families come on because, again, they wanted to hear from us directly with regard to what this means. It was quite funny, the amount of different circumstances that families were in, but really everybody is getting childcare for free until June. And so a lot of our answers, I think there was about 50 questions. People just wanted to really understand, is it true? Is it going to be free? And yes, it is indeed free. I think it's been vital also to be in constant contact with our partners. Nick spoke about it. This includes for us local governments, the state government, both here in Victoria and South Australia, and clearly the federal government as well, who are providing us with some support, which has been fantastic. We have over 20 partners that we've been, having to renegotiate contracts. And I've got to say, the support that we have received has been phenomenal, both from a commercial perspective, but also from a personal perspective, because everyone at the moment is hurting, including the local government and the state government. So it's just been wonderful to see them all, pitch in and help save the Y, help save our relationship, help save the industry, actually. The other partners that we have that are really important to us are our landlords. We have over 40 landlords. I've personally called every single one of them to explain our position, and my senior leaders have been in absolute regular contact. This is as hard on them. Some of them are, retirees that might own a king swim, for example, and this is their only source of income. Well, one of the major sources of income, and they're very dependent on it. And so we're having to be, really cognizant of the impact that this makes on our landlords as well. And the other people are obviously our suppliers, and we've received some phenomenal support from suppliers. I'll say, one of the first things that we did with regard to our staff, knowing that staff were having to be stood down, is we reached out to some suppliers like Coles and Woolworths and Audi and Telstra, the Victorian government, and all of them have given us exclusive rights for our people to be able to get jobs. And that has meant so much to our people to be able to go out and get temporary jobs and be useful during this time too. Because the other thing is, I think our staff have felt really helpless, not having a job to go to every day, and us then being able to support them in that to get another temporary job, whilst we're still absolutely keeping in contact with them, so that when we wake up again, we know that we've got a really loyal set of staff that are going to help us reopen and start back our business.
Yeah, that's some interesting sort of points there. If you don't mind me sort of asking it, it's probably more a little bit out of my own sort of interest, is because I haven't intersected with it too much. You've both sort of mentioned the JobKeeper support and that federal government support. What's that sort of looking like at the moment? Is it easy enough for businesses and for individuals to get access to that support payment, as far as or what are some of the complexities of navigating that and getting that to the people that need it? Is there any sort of insights that either of you could share there?
Yeah, absolutely. So JobKeeper, the way that we've treated JobKeeper when it came on is it's been another crisis basically for us. And the reason I say that is because it's absolutely fantastic for our employees. It's absolutely a lifesaver, and it's going to be for so many thousands of our employees. But there is indeed a lot of complexity that we've had to work through with the government. Basically, they've done a fantastic job, don't get me wrong, but they've had to drip feed information to us. Which means we've had to drip feed, unfortunately, that information to our staff, which has been, a little frustrating. I think, to put it in perspective, it was only legislated just before Easter. We've worked over most of Easter. We're now in a position where we're going to, work through making sure that every single one of our entities is eligible. And we're working with KPMG to ensure that happens. And then what we also have to do is we have to write to every single staff member that we believe is eligible in accordance with the legislation, and those that indeed aren't. And they then have to tell us, the onus is on employees to tell us that they want us to make that payment. The complexities are huge, and Nick mentioned the cash flow implications. We're going to have to borrow $10 million to make this payment, and then the government are going to pay us back. To put this in perspective, we've never really borrowed more than about $7 million in our whole history. So this is huge for us to be able to make this happen for our staff, but we're absolutely committed and determined to do it because it's so important to them.
Yeah, okay. That's pretty big. I remember Pete Burns talking about, during the GFC, not wanting to stand any staff down or make anyone redundant directly as a result of that. And that was probably the last biggest crisis that we faced. So that's significant straight away there. So, yeah, very, very, very interesting. Nick, I might skip a couple of questions if that's okay. I'm just conscious that I reckon you'll have a whole bunch of people out there that would love to ask you guys some questions, and they probably don't care too much for my questions. But But I just wanted to ask, what do you think? What do you think, or the organization, or what's your organization now planning for in terms of recovery? And what do you think recovery looks like for the industry? Do you think it will be, flick the switch as quickly as the switch flicked off, it'll switch back on, or do you think it's going to be a little bit different from that? I'm keen to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah, okay. Well, two elements to that being what impact it'll have for us and what impact it'll have for industry. If I cover off what does this mean for Belgravia Leisure, I don't think there's any doubt that right now, with the benefit of time to stop and reflect and think and ultimately plan, I'd be suggesting everything's up for grabs. We will no doubt look very different. If you like, it'll be Belgravia Leisure 2.0 that'll emerge out of this. And that's not to say that everything that we're doing before was wrong or not on the right track, but it's really just a bit of a chance for us to redesign and re-engineer how we do business. And so therefore, I think everything is up for grabs, whether that's our org structure and possibly roles that may not be needed, going forward. We may need new areas of support and resources. It might need a different approach to marketing. We're spending a lot of effort and time around our systems and trying to automate and digitize as much as we possibly can. We were dabbling with a bit of AI stuff late last year and early this year anyway, and we expect that sort of investment will continue to pay dividends for us. So we're spending a lot of our effort around that side of the business. And I think the challenge is for us the unknown timeline. So if we knew exactly when we're opening, we could be very clear about what that recovery phase looks like and when it kicks in. But of course, we have to be careful. We have to be cautious. We have 91% of our entire workforce stood down. And as Carolyn's already mentioned, the cash flow implications around that is significant. So we need to be really careful and planned and resourceful during this hibernation period for us. But yeah, a lot of time being spent on planning and re-engineering and redesigning what we may look like as an organisation going forward. I think if you ask about probably what impact it'll have on the industry, I think it's fair to say, and of course we're all crystal balling here, but I think it'll have a profound effect on the industry, and I expect there'll be a lot of organisations, not just in the leisure sector, that are having to think about what does the future look like. And I think for me, the thing that I've been sort of really keen to understand is what does the customer of tomorrow look like? What are their needs and expectations? And I think that if we can figure that out, because clearly the customer of tomorrow will be very different from the customer of yesterday because of the impact that this is going to have on their behaviours, their choices that they make, how they choose to engage and connect and use our services or not, and how we need to pivot some of the services to make sure that we are still, providing valuable, reliable, services that are well received. I think, if we can figure that question out, what does the customer of tomorrow look like? That'll then very much dictate, the member journey, the service delivery model, our marketing approach, and all the other things that come from it. But I've got no doubt that this will have a significant impact on the broader industry. I expect there'll be a whole lot of probably consolidation. There'll be a lot of M&A or merger and acquisition activity that'll no doubt go on. And I don't mean just in the contract management space, but if you look at what's happening, in the I suppose the commercial fitness space, I've got no doubt that there will be less operators and some consolidation around that area. I get a sense that it will be the strongest that will survive, and it's probably not just the biggest, but it's probably the fastest. We love the old expression of what is it? It's not the big fish that eats the small fish; it's the fast fish that eats the slow fish. And I think that's going to be really probably important in a new world that we will live in, whereby we need to be nimble. We need to be a little bit opportunistic without being tacky. And I think I've already seen some examples of that where companies are trying to position themselves now in response to consumer needs or client needs. And I get a sense that it's coming across as a bit, very commercial and very, unsavoury. And I think at the moment it's about planning, taking stock, thinking things through, and being very cautious about where we invest, but also looking at things with a keen eye. So yeah, I've got no doubt that there will be a number of trends and factors that will affect the industry as we go forward. You know, just as we've had significant, you know, global shaping influences on things like the GFC or 9/11. You know, what did that do to travel protocols globally? You know, if you think about that sort of stuff, that's where we can anticipate that things will change significantly. You know, we expect that you know, strategies around sanitisation and cleaning standards and, you know, the old no towel, no workout will never be, you know, more prevalent than it has been in the past. We may need to think about, you know, space utilisation and distancing measures in group fitness classes, temperature checks, a whole lot of things that may come into play as we start to rebuild. You know, things like digital online workouts, which I'm sure everyone's jumping on board. That's probably here to stay. I think it's a nice supplement to the industry. It won't replace the need for the connection that people want and will no doubt value as they want to, you know, reconnect with their venues. But I think there's probably a bit of a chance for the entire industry to realign. And I think, you know, if government can also understand what its role is, I think local councils have got, they've been shaken up through this process as well. And I think, like the Y, we rely heavily on that space. 90% of our business is working in partnership with local governments, but they're trying to figure out what does all this mean. And I think there will need to be some acceptance that there needs to be more than just all care, no responsibility. So in terms of how contract management looks like into the future and what services are delivered in-house versus outsourcing, that's a whole topic in itself. But yeah, look, I get a sense that industry will be very, very different if and when it gets a chance to relaunch.
Yeah, that's some really prudent points there, Nick, and it's really interesting to hear you sort of looking to the past for you know, significant events like this and how they've reshaped industries, and then also looking towards the future. It's an interesting one, you know, in the sort of recreation and fitness space. You know, we're all working from home. I don't know about everyone else in the sort of listener group, but I'm certainly starting to feel that belt get a little bit tighter, and I was I actually signed up to the Home Fitness Network myself for, I'm not trying to spruik anyone's services here, but I think it was $5 a week or something like that. So fantastic value for money to be able to go and engage and do all of these fitness programs that you would normally do in a fitness center from home. I've got a lot of friends in the industry, obviously, in that space as well, and I think it's fantastic to see both organizations really pivoting into that space. A lot of, you know, mental health, wellness, and things like that coming through from the Y as well. Just really interesting to see those the really rapid response and sort of shifts where we can make some new initiatives. So I think probably the next question, Caroline, is for you. Is you know, what are the silver linings for the Y? You know, what opportunities are you exploring? I know you touched on some of the justice opportunities, but is there anything in the sort of recreation space that you guys are looking at now that you might not have otherwise looked at?
Yeah, absolutely. So we at the Y, we tend to just get on and do our job. And I guess I've been the CEO since August, and I've come in with fresh eyes and really have established that we're our own best kept secret. We're a not-for-profit. We've been serving Victorians for 168 years. We're in fact the oldest social enterprise in Australia, and every day we redistribute our surplus to our mission work in youth services. So like, I think this is our opportunity to shout from the rooftops the incredible work that we do. We can't do it face to face at the moment, except for our childcare and youth justice. But we also run the National Skateboarding League. This gives agency to this sport to about 100,000 participants every year. So it is a recreational sport that really saves a lot of young people's lives, and it's something that we're going to take to the next level. In fact, we were doing the trials for it for the Olympics, which unfortunately has been obviously delayed. And we're also looking at and working with the Victorian government and have just been part of the grant that they have done with regard to the mental health wellness package. So we've received a significant sum of money, and that together with JobKeeper and our relationships with Vic Health, who have also contributed some money into that, means that we can really start back up our recreational work with all our customers, but also we're really looking at young people who this term are having to stay at home. And we believe that a lot of those young people are going to, particularly in vulnerable families and the rise of, use of alcohol, abuse, unfortunately, at home, unsafe environments. Usually school is a bastion, of safety for these young people. So we're looking at creating programming that is preventative. It's much like what we do in our recreation centres and our youth hubs every single day, but we're going to be repurposing that and doing it online with the partners that we have created. We, like many, have also given all our customers at a Will Sprocket, because they have given it completely free to all our customers, and 12,000 people have taken this up, which is Les Mills. It's obviously normally $5 a month, but it's completely free for the Y customers, contract partners, and all our staff, which is just fantastic. I've been doing it at home, so my belt is getting a little tighter, but I'm still doing the body balances at home. We also help around about 60,000 young people learn to swim every year through our Y brand and also our King Swim. And we've been providing weekly programming to those young people. They can't get in the pool at the moment, obviously, but we can still teach them safety and techniques from home. And that, I know that's been really helping parents, particularly of our younger cohorts, and the students to still be able to maintain some of their swimming lessons. So I think there's some of the key things that we've been able to do in the recreation space. We're also doing not only, we know also that we have around about 15,000 active adults that look forward to our programs within our recreation absolutely every day, and the connection that is created. And what we're doing is working through how we connect with them with series as much like this. It might be physical education, but it's also, it's that coffee that people used to have together afterwards, or the walk that they used to have. So we're just working through how we connect that and use the money that we have been granted by the Victorian government initially to do all the work with regard to youth, because that's the primary thing, but then look at other vulnerable groups, so that we make sure that when we do reopen, because we probably won't have a vaccine when we reopen, so we need to be able to help those vulnerable groups that still need to stay home, to give them things to do that are really purposeful, so they don't put themselves at risk.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sounds very interesting. So I'd just, with the sort of remaining time that we've got left, rather than sort of going through too many more of my questions, because you guys have both sort of answered some of the other questions, through your other responses. It'd be great to hear from our listeners across the industry. If you want to use the chat bar and just sort of say who you are and where you're from, and if you've got a question for either Nick or Caroline or for LSV, feel free to drop that in the chat bar. You just hover your mouse over the center of the screen, and you can click, I think it's show conversation, and you should be able to drop something in there. We'd love to hear from everyone in the audience, and I'll sort of triage those questions. In the meantime, as those sort of come through, Nick, I'd love to hear. You mentioned the fastest fish and those sort of larger organizations, probably being more resilient by nature of the sort of resources and operations that they already have. It'd be interesting to sort of hear, some of the sort of blue sky type thinking that you're going through, and what kind of opportunities you're looking at, and or really it's that old saying, you got to make hay while the sun shines. So how that sort of leveraging the good times, or making the most of the good times, so that we're ready for these times like this. If you've got any sort of insights on there, it'd be great to hear about that, just while we're waiting for some more questions to come through from the audience.
Sure. Yeah, well, I think, as I mentioned before, it's no better chance to work on the business than in the business right now, when you're forced to, work from home, or stop and take that, that macro perspective. And I think if I started with macro trends, and many of you will know this sort of stuff anyway as you read the papers, but there's clearly going to be a shift, at a high level around, things like nationalism and being far more self-sufficient and inward-looking, and we probably have been doing that with agriculture and the like. It'll happen with manufacturing, and for us, it's about how will that impact things like tourism, given that we run a lot of caravan parks and tourism assets and day spas. So that for us is a bit of a chance to think through in terms of those blue sky opportunities that will exist there. Of course, along with nationalism, there'll be a shift around totalitarianism, without getting too political, but we understand, the central controls that will come from government. Who would have thought you could be fined or put into jail for sitting on a picnic rug with your boyfriend or girlfriend, or eating a kebab on a bench? So the changes around that sort of stuff are significant, and I expect they'll have a lasting impact, and then very necessary for obvious reason. But I think the role of government will be really be clear about recovery in both social and economic terms, and I think the fact that we've just created multi-generational debt, and again, vastly needed and very much appreciated for organisations like us, and of course all the thousands and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people that are going to be benefiting from things like JobKeeper. But that level of debt and that level of shift in policy is going to be significant and will play out for many decades to come. And so for us, it's constantly thinking about, well, where do we again pivot? How do we shift? How do we realign and look at opportunities? And I think, as I mentioned, we expect Learn to Swim, for example, still being a really important essential service. We expect people to be a little bit more particular and interested in their own personal well-being, and not just from a mental health point of view, which is obviously the big ticket item at the moment, which is really super important, and we need to scramble and get more resources in that space, but also for people taking out time and spending money on their personal well-being in a broader sense, and things like staycations and the like. Again, I think will be something that we'll look at with quite a bit of interest. We expect there'll be a bit of a wave around that, and we want to make sure that we can ride on that. I mentioned before that the caravan parks and tourism assets, so domestic markets will be key for us. And I think the rest of it, whether not talking specifically about business opportunities, it's a bit of a chance for us as an organisation, and for every organisation, to really take stock and make sure that they've got the right people around them. And as we've mentioned a few times, we're blessed with the people that we have, but also making sure that we are geared up, strategically positioned, ready to take advantage of whatever shifting markets occur. So, I just hope we get a chance to pay back the loyalty that our people have shown us, because it's been just outstanding and amazing. And I hope we're around for many decades, many generations to come, to reward them for that loyalty and commitment that's been shown. But yeah, it's making sure that we don't forget that the most important, I suppose, asset throughout this whole period are our people, and making sure that we're planning and preparing with both a macro and a micro perspective.
So it's a really interesting. You've raised some really interesting points there, and it is always sort of awkward to sort of navigate around politics, and particularly when you're responsible for such a large organization and an industry. But there are all sorts of interesting questions in there around what are the social impacts and the legal impacts, and how will that affect society. I think you're right that it'd be great to see people take vacations at home, i.e. within our sort of national borders, and invest that money into local economies. We're certainly going to need it. And then there's all of this sort of we haven't really seen it sort of play out too much, the lessons from this crisis and how it's come about in the first place, and how we look at trade and various sort of industries and how they're regulated, obviously with the all of the challenges of sort of international regulation, but hopefully we'll see some regulation in sort of domestically that helps us sort of insulate from further crises like this. I mean, that's certainly my hope. I think you touched on that sort of historical question. If we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat the mistakes. And hopefully, we've looked at some of the fallout from past events, and hopefully armed with optimism and some of the wisdom of learning from the past, hopefully we see some good leadership at a political level. But it's really interesting to sort of hear your perspective on that, and thank you for sharing that as well. We've had a couple questions come through. Thanks to those that have left questions. So maybe Caroline, maybe you can answer the first one, which is, what is your single key message to your staff given the uncertainty of the situation?
All right, I think there's quite a few there. I think that the key one is around patience. This is evolving very, very quickly, and I think we all need to be patient with how it's evolving. I think the next one is people should feel incredibly proud. This is quite momentous when you think about it and reflect on it, that the world is all acting almost in unison to ensure that our most vulnerable people in particular aren't impacted by this. And this is life and death. When we stay inside, this is about this and isolate and do the right thing. This is actually about saving lives. And we've had, a number of lives lost in Australia, but it could have been so much worse had we not acted like we have. So I think people need to reflect on that and feel a sense of pride that we have been able to achieve that, and a sense of solidarity that the world has acted like this. I think the next thing is to be thinking about, firstly, what are you going to do in this suppression period, as Scott Morrison has dubbed it? How are you learning new things? How are you volunteering? How are you contributing? It could be a time where you draw into yourself and don't take on things that you've always wanted to do. You've cleaned out the cupboards already and you've done all those sorts of things, but there's so much online that you can do. Go and learn the guitar, or learn a language, or these things are just completely available to people. Or take up the opportunities. At the Y, we're going to, in the next couple of weeks, have a lot of opportunities around volunteering. Take up some of those volunteer opportunities as well. I think the last thing that I'm actually right now just looking outside, and I'm very fortunate in that I can see a beautiful autumn tree. And I think we have to reflect on the fact that only a few months ago, I couldn't even see that tree because of the air quality. And our air quality now is the most magnificent it's been in years and years. So I think we have to learn from, do we really always have to drive to work? Do we have to muck up our environment for each other now that we've sort of taken a bit of a step back? So I think it's a time for reflection around things like that as well.
Yeah, there's some really interesting images out there, particularly New Delhi and Shanghai and those types of cities, Beijing, where they're seeing blue sky sometimes for the first time, and sort of the reactions to that. But I suppose the sort of economic forecast of that, as soon as everything fires back up again, we're unfortunately in those sort of manufacturing developing economies, that it'll be sort of straight back to where it was, because we haven't had any regulatory change. But yeah, look, there's certainly a lot to be optimistic about. We've got Justin Scarr from Royal Life has just said thank you for your comments. He's got a question. In recent weeks, we've seen a bit of movement across major sporting organisations. Without buying into the Sydney versus Melbourne rivalry, would you rather be leading the AFL or the NRL in the current context? And what lessons, if any, are there for our own aspirations to reopen industry soon? So it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek question there as well.
I think Justin's trying to stir things up a bit there. But yeah, look, again, I hope there aren't too many sort of Sydney-siders or non-Victorians listening in. But to be honest, I don't take much interest in the NRL. And from what it appears, just at a high level, admittedly, I haven't been scanning that as much as I have, the latest publications around JobKeeper. How boring is our life at the moment, Carolyn? But from what I can tell, I think the NRL clearly didn't consult or didn't listen or didn't take into account, the needs of the public and of course their players and the broader community. I would have thought it's a bit preemptive, or from what I've seen, they've shot a bit early, and I get a sense that probably, and I'm not picking on the NRL, and I'm not saying AFL is better than NRL by any means, but I think both industries, and if I reflect on the AFL, and this is again maybe a broader discussion that could go on for ages, but the AFL have typically been very good, not always perfect, but have been very good at leading a lot of, not always getting it right, but a lot of social justice issues, whether that's early days, 15, 20 years ago, when the early stages around community acceptance of Indigenous issues was probably front and centre. Even women in sport, I think they've been relatively on the front foot to drive that and to create opportunities there. They are fairly well considered in normal times, but these aren't normal times. And so I think, we can learn from sport, we can learn from big business, we can learn from government, and we can certainly learn from other countries. I think, in many, many cases, other countries are well advanced or well further down the track than what we are. So we're keeping a keen eye to anyone that's being able to unpack this crazy world we live in, and what it means for us, and how to make sure that we can look after our people in a world that's gone mad.
I absolutely love that question and your response there. I think that's great, and just so we're all on the same page here, Justin. We're all big AFL fans down here, and no one's watching the NRL. No one cares about the NRL. Just to be very, very clear. Thank you very much. Hey, sorry, Carolyn.
I said, what's the NRL?
Yeah, exactly. I just want to again thank you both so much for your time today. Thank you very much for speaking to our industry around some of the challenges and hurdles that you guys are navigating, some of the incredible burden that you're carrying as well, and sharing insights into that. I know that whether you're a receptionist at an aquatic center and you've been stood down and you're not getting paid, that obviously hits very hard, but it's also really hard knowing that you're responsible for so many people in that kind of position. So I think it's been great to hear some insights from you guys around even having to sort of dip into borrowing cash to make sure that people can get paid, and to think about all of those hurdles that are coming, not just the current ones, but the ones that are coming. I'd just like to thank you both on behalf of Lifesaving Victoria and Fitness Australia for your time, and I'd just like to thank everyone for listening in and dialing in. At the peak there, we had about 100 people signed in, so there's 100 people that got to hear from you guys today that might not otherwise get that opportunity. So thank you very much, and I just encourage everyone to continue to provide your feedback and suggestions to us. Our email address in Pool Safety is assessments@lsv.com.au. And we look forward to hearing from everyone and engaging with everyone tomorrow for the first fitness session with Fitness Australia and Jen Dugard, and then next week again with in our sort of CEO sessions, we've got Mark Collins again. So thanks very much again, guys. If everyone wants to sort of leave the session, all you need to do is just click the red hang up button, and you'll be able to exit the session. And we've got quite a few comments coming through just saying thanks again to you guys. So thanks very much.
Good one. Thanks, RJ. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate that.
Cheers.